The wind kicked up dust in the empty street, swirling it into tiny cyclones that danced between the weathered buildings. Clara Winters stood at the schoolhouse window, watching the day fade into dusk. Her fingers trembled slightly as she arranged tomorrow's lesson plans on her desk, neat stacks of paper that represented order in a chaotic world. The sound came first. Boot heels striking wooden planks, spurs jingling with each deliberate step. Clara's hand froze mid-motion, her breath catching in her throat. She knew those footsteps. Jake Blackwood's shadow fell across the schoolyard before he did. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the casual confidence of a man who feared nothing and no one. His black hat sat low over eyes that had seen too much, his leather vest worn from years on the trail. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She straightened her spine and smoothed her skirt, a armor of propriety against whatever was coming. Jake stopped at the bottom of the schoolhouse steps, looking up at the building like a man might regard a church, with reverence and trepidation. When his gaze found her silhouette in the window, everything stilled. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The town of Redemption had sprung up around a silver mine 20 years ago, growing from tents to wooden structures to the occasional brick building. The schoolhouse stood as its crown jewel, a two-story white clapboard building with a small bell tower. Inside, rows of desks faced Clara's larger desk and the chalkboard behind it, still bearing the remnants of today's arithmetic lesson. At 37, Clara had given 18 years to teaching. Her brown hair, streaked with early gray, was always pinned in a neat bun. Her blue eyes missed nothing. The children respected her. The parents trusted her. She was a fixture, as permanent as the mountains that surrounded them. Jake Blackwood was a different kind of fixture. His name traveled on whispers, the outlaw who'd robbed 3 banks across 2 territories, who'd shot the Prescott brothers in self-defense, who controlled the mountain passes and could make men disappear. Some said he had a hideout with 20 men. Others claimed he worked alone. All agreed he was dangerous. Clara had known him before all that. Before the stories. Before the blood. The knock at the schoolhouse door was soft, almost hesitant. Clara considered not answering, but that would only delay the inevitable. She crossed the room, each footstep echoing in the empty building. When she opened the door, Jake stood with his hat in his hands. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark beard. He looked older than his 42 years. "Miss Winters," he said, his voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. "Mr. Blackwood." She kept her tone neutral, her hand tied on the doorframe. "School's closed for the day." A smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I ain't here for learnin', Dot." "Then why are you here?" Jake shifted his weight, an uncharacteristic display of uncertainty. "May I come in?" Clara hesitated, then stepped back. Jake entered, his presence immediately filling the room. He looked out of place among the children's desks, a wolf in a henhouse. "It's been a while," he said, turning his hat in his hands. 7 years, Clara replied. "Not long enough for some folks around here." Jake nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "I've been thinking about you." "That's not my concern." "It could be." He reached into his vest and pulled out a folded document. "I got something to show you." Clara crossed her arms. "I'm not interested in stolen goods." "Not stolen. Bought and paid for." He unfolded the paper on her desk. "It's the deed to this town." Clara stared at the document, official-looking with its elaborate script and red seal. "That's impossible. The mining company owns everything, the land, the buildings. Even this schoolhouse." Jake tapped the paper. "And I bought it all from them. Fair and square." "Why would you do that?" Jake looked at her, his eyes softening. "I want you to marry me, Clara." The words hung in the air between them. Clara felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "That's absurd," she finally managed. "Is it?" Jake stepped closer. "We had something once. We were children. We knew what we wanted." Clara turned away, moving to the window. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. "You chose your path, Jake. I chose mine. Paths can cross again." He came to stand behind her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I'm offering you everything. The deed to the town instead of a ring. Power instead of pretty words." Clara turned to face him. "And what would the schoolmarm do with the town?" "Whatever she wants." Jake's eyes held hers. "Build it into something better. Something that's ours." "I can't marry an outlaw." "Then marry a man who's trying to change." The proposal hung between them, impossible and tempting all at once. Clara shook her head. "I need time." Jake nodded, folding the deed and placing it on her desk. "Summer break starts tomorrow, doesn't it? You have until school begins again to decide." He put his hat back on, adjusting the brim. At the door, he paused. "I'll be around." Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone with a piece of paper that could change everything. The following days passed in a blur of whispers and sidelong glances. Word spread quickly in Redemption that Jake Blackwood was back, and that he'd been seen at the schoolhouse. Clara felt the weight of unasked questions whenever she walked down Main Street or bought supplies at the general store. She kept the deed locked in her desk drawer, but she couldn't lock away her thoughts so easily. At night, she lay awake remembering the boy Jake had been, wild and laughing, with dreams bigger than the Montana sky. She remembered stolen kisses behind her father's barn, promises made under summer stars. And then she remembered the day he'd ridden away, choosing freedom over her. A week after Jake's proposal, Clara sat on the schoolhouse steps, watching the children play in the yard during their midday break. Little Emily Jenkins ran up, her blonde braids bouncing. "Miss Winters, is it true you're going to marry the bad man?" Clara's breath caught. "Who told you that, Emily?" "My papa said the outlaw wants to make you his wife, but Mama said you're too smart for that." Before Clara could respond, Sheriff Miller appeared at the schoolyard gate. He tipped his hat to her, his expression grim. "Miss Winters, mind if I have a word?" Clara sent Emily back to play and moved to meet the sheriff. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Miller's weathered face creased with concern. "Heard Blackwood's been sniffing around. Wanted to make sure you're not in any danger." "I can handle Jake Blackwood." "With all due respect, ma'am, men like him don't change their spots. Whatever he's offering you, it ain't worth it." Clara straightened. "I wasn't aware my personal affairs were the sheriff's business." Miller's cheeks reddened. "This town needs you, Miss Winters. The children need you. Just be careful." He left her standing there, feeling like a spectacle. That evening, as she locked up the schoolhouse for the final time before summer break, she sensed a presence behind her. Jake leaned against a tree, watching her. In the fading light, he looked almost like the boy she'd known, before the hardness, before the legend. "They're talking about us," she said. "Small towns always talk." He pushed off from the tree and approached. "Walk with me." They strolled in silence toward the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land. The setting sun painted the mountains gold and purple. "I remember teaching you to read under that oak tree," Clara said, pointing to a massive tree on a small hill. Jake smiled. "You were bossy even then. You were stubborn. Some things don't change." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "But some things do. I'm tired, Clara. Tired of running, tired of being alone. You made that choice. I was 18 and stupid. Thought I needed to make my fortune before I could come back for you." His voice roughened. "By the time I had money, I also had a price on my head." Clara looked away. "It doesn't matter now, doesn't it?" Jake touched her arm gently. "I bought this town to give us a fresh start. I can make things right. By owning people's homes, their businesses, by protecting them, building something that lasts." His eyes held hers. "With you." Clara felt something crack inside her chest, a wall she'd built years ago beginning to crumble. "I need to go." She turned and walked quickly back toward town, feeling his eyes on her back all the way. The first weeks of summer passed slowly. Clara spent her days tending her small garden, reading books she'd put aside during the school year, and avoiding the prying eyes of townsfolk. Jake kept his distance but remained in Redemption, taking a room above the saloon. Occasionally, she'd glimpse him riding in or out of town, or talking with the blacksmith or the store owner. Strange rumors began to circulate. Jake had paid off the mortgage on the widow Johnson's farm. He'd hired men to repair the bridge washed out in spring floods. He'd stopped a cattle rustler from stealing the Peterson herd. Clara tried not to listen, but each story wormed its way into her thoughts, complicating her image of the man she'd known. One rainy afternoon, Clara climbed to the schoolhouse attic to organize supplies for the coming term. In a forgotten corner, behind a stack of old primers, she found a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Opening it, she recognized the handwriting of Margaret Fletcher, the town's first teacher who had died 10 years earlier. Clara took the journal home, curling up beside her window as rain pattered against the glass. Margaret's elegant script told the story of Redemption's early days and of her love for a man named Thomas Reed, a gambler with dreams of legitimacy. "He asks me to be his wife," one entry read, "offering me a future built on cards and chance. My heart says yes, but my conscience rebels. Can a woman of principle bind herself to a man whose morals bend with the wind?" Clara's fingers trembled as she turned the pages. The parallels were unmistakable. Margaret had eventually married Thomas, following him to California in search of gold. The final entries spoke of disillusionment and regret. "I have lost myself in trying to save him. My classroom is but a memory, my students' faces fading like ghosts. Thomas gambles still, though he promised to stop. I wonder if love alone can transform a man's nature, or if I was foolish to believe it could. Clara closed the journal, her cheeks wet with tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the setting sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across her small room. A knock at her door startled her. She wiped her eyes and smoothed her hair before answering. Mayor Simmons stood on her porch, hat in hand, his round face troubled. "Evening, Miss Winters. Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, Mayor. Please come in." He stepped inside but remained standing, twisting his hat nervously. "I'll be direct, Miss Winters. The town council met today. We're concerned about Blackwood's presence here and his apparent interest in you." Clara felt heat rise to her face. "My personal affairs are your own business, of course," Simmons interrupted. "But when they involve a known criminal who claims to own our town, they become everyone's concern. What exactly are you asking of me?" Simmons sighed. "We need to know if his claim is legitimate. And if it is, we need to know your intentions." "My intentions?" "He's made no secret that he's here for you. If you were to accept his proposal, what would that mean for redemption?" Clara stared at the mayor, anger building in her chest. "So the town council sent you to ask if I plan to marry an outlaw and help him control redemption?" Simmons had the grace to look embarrassed. "People are scared, Clara. They don't know what to think." "Neither do I," she admitted, her anger deflating. "But I would never do anything to harm this town or its people. You should know that." After the mayor left, Clara sat with Margaret's journal in her lap, feeling the weight of choices made and unmade. Outside her window, a rider passed Jake, heading toward the hills where he'd made camp. She watched until his silhouette disappeared into the gathering darkness. The next morning, Clara rode out to the old oak tree, Margaret's journal in her saddlebag. The massive tree stood alone on its hill, overlooking the valley where redemption nestled. She dismounted and sat in its shade, opening the journal to its final entry. "A woman must know her own heart, but also her own strength. Love that requires the sacrifice of one's principles is no love at all, but a beautiful cage." I leave these words as testament, hoping another might learn what took me too long to understand. Clara closed the book, her decision crystallizing like ice in winter. She knew what she had to do. She found Jake at his camp as the sun began its descent. He sat by a small fire, cleaning his pistol. When he saw her, he set the weapon aside and stood. "Wasn't expecting company," he said, but his eyes betrayed his pleasure at seeing her. "We need to talk." Clara remained on her horse, maintaining distance. Jake nodded. "I'm listening." "I can't marry you." The words hung between them. Jake's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes dimmed. "Because of what I've done?" he asked quietly. "Because of what you're doing now." Clara met his gaze steadily. "Buying this town doesn't erase your past. It just gives you power over people who can't fight back. That's not why I did it, isn't it? You couldn't win me with words, so you tried to buy me with a deed." Jake's jaw tightened. "That's not fair. Neither is putting me in this position." Clara's voice cracked slightly. "The boy I loved would never have used people as bargaining chips. The boy you loved couldn't protect you, couldn't give you anything." Jake's voice roughened. "I'm trying to be better. Better isn't about what you own. It's about who you are." Clara pulled Margaret's journal from her saddlebag and held it out. "Read this. Then decide if you're really trying to change or just trying to win." Jake took the journal, confusion crossing his features. "What is this?" "A story about choices. About a woman who loved a man but lost herself in trying to save him." Clara gathered her reins. "I won't make the same mistake." She turned her horse, but Jake's voice stopped her. "What if I give it all up?" he asked. "The deed, the land, everything. What if I just want you?" Clara looked back at him, her heart breaking all over again. "Then you'd be asking me to love a man with nothing but his word. And your word stopped meaning anything the day you chose that life over me." She rode away, tears blurring her vision, feeling as though she'd left a piece of herself behind under that oak tree. The summer days stretched long and hot. Clara threw herself into preparing for the new school year, ordering books, planning lessons, anything to keep her mind occupied. She heard that Jake still lingered in redemption, though she rarely saw him. The deed remained locked in her desk drawer, untouched. A week before school was to begin, Clara returned to the schoolhouse to find Sheriff Miller waiting for her. "There's been trouble," he said without preamble. "The Garrett gang rode in last night. They've got a score to settle with Blackwood." Clara's blood ran cold. "Where is he?" "Holed up at the saloon. They've got the place surrounded." Miller looked uncomfortable. "They're demanding he come out, or they start shooting up the town." Clara unlocked the schoolhouse and went straight to her desk, retrieving the deed. Take me there. The scene at the saloon was tense. 5 hard-looking men on horseback faced the building, rifles ready. Townspeople peered nervously from windows and doorways. Jake stood on the saloon's porch, unarmed, his hands visible. A burly man with a scarred face appeared to be the leader. You took something that belonged to us, Blackwood. We've come to collect, with interest. You're not getting anything, Garrett, Jake replied evenly. Ride out while you still can. Garrett laughed. You're outnumbered and outgunned. And I don't see your famous gang anywhere. There never was a gang, Jake said. Just stories. Clara pushed through the gathered crowd, the sheriff at her heels. She held the deed tightly in her hand. Mr. Garrett, she called, stepping forward. I believe this is what you're looking for. All eyes turned to her. Jake's expression shifted from surprise to alarm. Clara, don't. This deed represents ownership of the land and buildings of Redemption, she continued, ignoring Jake. If you're here for something valuable, this is it. Garrett eyed her suspiciously. And who might you be? The schoolteacher. And the person who legally holds this deed. Jake stepped forward. She's lying. The deed is mine. Clara shot him a warning look. Mr. Blackwood signed it over to me weeks ago. If you want it, you'll have to deal with me. Garrett dismounted, approaching Clara with narrowed eyes. Hand it over, then. First, you and your men will drop your weapons and leave town. The deed will be waiting for you at the county line. Garrett laughed. You're in no position to make demands, lady, aren't I? Clara stood her ground. This piece of paper is worthless if you're dead. And the first man who makes a move toward me will be shot by the sheriff standing behind me. Sheriff Miller raised his rifle in confirmation. The standoff stretched, tension crackling like lightning before a storm. Finally, Garrett spat in the dirt. Fine. We'll play it your way. Boys, holster up. His men reluctantly lowered their weapons. Garrett pointed at Clara. County line. 1 hour. Just you and the deed. Just me, Clara agreed. As the Garrett gang rode out of town, Jake grabbed Clara's arm, pulling her aside. Have you lost your mind? He hissed. They'll kill you. No, they won't. Clara held up the deed. Because I'm not going to the county line. And neither is this. Understanding dawned in Jake's eyes. You're bluffing. I learned from the best. She met his gaze steadily. You need to leave, Jake. Now, while they're waiting for me. And go where? Anywhere. Start over. Be the man you keep saying you want to be. Jake stared at her, conflict written across his features. Come with me. Clara shook her head. My place is here. Without me. Without you. Jake looked around at the town, at the schoolhouse visible in the distance. What about the deed? Clara held it out to him. Take it. Do what you want with it. But know that owning something doesn't make it yours. Not really. Jake took the paper, his fingers brushing hers. For a moment, they stood connected by this fragile link to a future that would never be. I did love you, he said quietly. Still do. I know. Clara stepped back. That's why you'll ride away. And that's why you'll let this town be free. Jake folded the deed and tucked it inside his vest. He touched the brim of his hat in a final salute, then turned and walked toward the livery stable. Clara watched him go, feeling both hollow and whole. The first day of the new school term dawned clear and bright. Clara rang the bell, summoning children from across town. They filed in, taking their seats, faces eager and curious. She stood before them, chalk in hand, ready to begin another year. Through the window, she could see the oak tree on its distant hill. Last night, she had buried Margaret's journal there, returning it to the earth with a silent promise to remember its lessons. The town of Redemption continued much as it always had. The mining company, discovering that Jake had forged the deed, reclaimed official ownership but left the town to govern itself as before. The Garrett gang never returned, perhaps believing the deed lost or worthless. As for Jake Blackwood, stories still circulated. Some said he'd gone to California. Others claimed he'd been seen in Colorado. The legend grew, as legends do, but in Redemption, he became a ghost, present only in memory. Months later, as winter settled over the mountains, Clara found a small package on her desk one morning. Inside was a deed, the real one this time, transferring ownership of the schoolhouse and the land it stood on to Clara Winters and the children of Redemption in perpetuity. No note accompanied it. None was needed. That evening, Clara stood on the schoolhouse steps, watching the sun set behind the mountains. In the fading light, she thought she saw a lone rider on the distant ridge, a silhouette against the sky. Then he was gone, like a shadow chased by the wind. Clara touched the deed in her pocket. Some gifts came with strings attached. Others came with freedom. She had chosen her path, just as Jake had chosen his. In the end, perhaps that was all anyone could do, choose, and live with the choosing. She turned and went inside, closing the door on the gathering darkness. Tomorrow would bring another day of lessons, of children's voices, of life continuing. And that, Clara knew, was enough.